Michael from Richard J. Sika Pest Control. Happy to be with you today talking about a very prevalent topic as we go into the fall of 2016. In fact, I believe we hit that mark for the seasonal change about a few days ago, if not a week. So, can you first of all believe that it's 2016 in the fall? We're about to turn over yet another new year. Hoping all of your aspirations are going well. And another likely goal of yours will be for the months of October, November, December, and on to keep rats and mice out of your home, otherwise known as rodent control in the pest control business. And this is a very important topic given that now it's getting colder. See how accustomed we are to speaking about critters that have over four legs. But these rodents now need somewhere warm to go. And your house is primed and ready as the place to be for not only a source of comfort, but food. And they're very interested in both of those facets. So we're really going to walk through a lot of what it means to control these potential animals, and best to your ability and those of individuals that you contract or hire to handle the situation, get rid of all the rodents. Now we want to start with an understanding of what they are and the very nature that makes them unsavory to many individuals. And that would be, if you look at the word rodent in its entirety, it really means to gnaw. Now this has a lot of subcontext. What do they gnaw at? They at physical materials, at your peace of mind. It's not easy to sleep when you can hear scurrying and you don't have a pet in your home. So for example, if you don't have a cat or a dog and you hear the little pitter patter at night and it's 10:30 and nobody feels like getting up except for the thing that already is up, out, and about in your home, looking for what likely is at that point a food source, you're not going to sleep very well. And that's the, frankly, main benefit of getting your house completely looked over and cleaned. You won't have to worry about these animals infiltrating parts that you never wanted them to in the first place. Another issue with these animals is that they can carry disease. You've heard of the bubonic plague. Now, fortunately, medical advances have reduced the likelihood that something as widespread and catastrophic as that can be is going to spread as widely in today's world. But on an individual one-to-one level, is there still the possibility, whether it be rabies or some other sickly contraction, that these animals can hold disease and bring it into places you would otherwise prefer not to have them? Yes, which is another reason and facet to address this issue if you know, or if you know somebody who has rodent problems. Again, they've spread the plague, and it's partly because of their ability to be so mobile. I don't know if you've noticed, but these things get around like lightning. They can go from place to place in very quiet fashion. You think of the cartoon hit show Tom and Jerry. There is Jerry evading Tom nearly every time, so not only they're very difficult to catch, and I know that was cartoonist based and entertainment themed, however, some basic principles run true. They're very quiet. I mean, they have made a career, a life, a reputation out of getting around without much noise. And again, another reason why, referencing that show, Jerry would always be going after the cheese. Well, I'll tell you what, the new metaphorical cheese in your perspective is any and all culinary items in your home. Now, here's the worst part of this. Can you imagine if you don't know that one of these mice or rats have taken a bite out of your filet mignon that is still remaining in the refrigerator, but they found a small opening connected into the wiring on the back of the refrigerator that enabled them to go in ever so briefly, because they know it's a storage house of food, and bite something and then leave? so that you come in innocently the next day, get that out of the fridge, and you bite into it without even knowing. That's the reality, or frankly, the nightmare that we want to prevent in this case. Now, some other interesting ideas. Today, due to the increased sanitation and effective rodent prevention programs, the threat of disease is not as critical. And we want to hammer that home just so we don't create a state of paranoia. There is not going to, in all likelihood, however, there is no absolutist truths here, going to be a widespread, incredible breakout of unstoppable, unbelievable diseases from these rodents, especially with the vigilance and diligence of our medical industries and their desire to create remedies that do aid and fix some of the issues of today. But these animals do cause a lot of food loss worldwide. They can unfortunately contaminate it, not just by eating, but by adding what are in many cases their own fur and feces into your breakfast, lunch, and or dinner. And that's just by the nature of an animalistic instinct to, as soon as food becomes their point of contact and is seen by them, they'll go straight towards it, not matter if they leave it perfectly fine or make a complete mess of it. That's another factor to consider, along with what may be the byproducts of some feces and fur-related contamination. Now, buildings are also interesting because these things can gnaw into many types of materials that hold an entire tower, house, farm, barn together, including lead sheathing, cinder block. Can you imagine that a mouse or a rat can chew through parts of cinder block? That's unreal. Aluminum siding, and check this out, some forms of concrete. I mean, these things are like little mini destroyer bots. They can just chew, gnaw, fester their way through almost every material that is at least used in the commercial building market. And I will say, as far as habitual tendencies of these animals, they reproduce rapidly at night. I mean, that is the time when they love to make new family members, and then from there, it's just everybody goes crazy in the morning. I should rephrase. When they have their children at night, they continue with their regular day routine. Now, I will say that a Norway or roof rat will move within a diameter of about 98 to 64 feet, whereas a mouse, and many different types of it, are 10 to 33 feet. So if you want to put that on a relative scale, rats are more brave, on average, than mice. Do you have the heroic warrior go all in mouse every once in a while? Absolutely. You'll find some Jerrys in parts of your county or region. But for the most part, if you see one of these rodents and you're trying to figure out, is it a mouse, is it a rat? If it's going very far distances, and again, the reference is a diameter of 98 to 164 feet, that's a rat. Whereas a 10 to 33 foot range is a mouse. That is just to provide a range of behavioral movement for these animals. And interestingly, rats, just to further distinguish the two groups, tend to eat most of their food at once, whereas mice are the nibblers of the rodent family. So that's a interesting and important distinction if you're checking out your food and you see a little small part of it is missing, whereas the whole thing is totally gone, MIA. If it's just not there, you probably have a rat. If it's only partly eaten, then you have a mouse. It's also worth noting that these animals can squeeze through very small openings. In fact, the metric for rats is a half an inch is all that they need, and I believe mice are somewhere around a quarter of an inch. Imagine that. That in that small space, one of these animals can come in and contaminate any area. Doesn't matter if it's residential, regional, corporate, commercial, they can get in. And if they have a motive and a reason to, which are only amplified during this wintry season that's about to come, then they will. And thus you're going to want to understand how to get rid of these animals. And once again, for a brief recap, they do eat through lead sheathing. And this can serve as your checklist to imagine what materials you have in your home or business and if they're at risk. Cinder block in many cases, aluminum siding, fascinatingly, and some forms of concrete. Furthermore, they do have major activity at night. So it's a strong propensity, habit of yours would be to take any food out of very available areas, such as leaving it, especially if you are an individual who is a little bit less than immaculately clean, leaving food on the floor, even just a very small portion of it, which is something I imagine you don't do. You're probably a very cleanly, holistic individual. If, however, in the event a piece of food happens to fall, unbeknownst to you, it could be the signal that draws in these animals, which, as a side note, could be in places of your house that you have yet to surveillance on a regular basis. Think of places that you don't normally go, or perhaps storage units that are just sitting there, unchecked, unused, unregulated. That could be their semi-home. And again, the night, for your reference, going back to that, is when they reproduce. Rats eat everything at one time. Mice are more nibblers. Interestingly, rats, however, you would think that they're more brazen because they go a larger diameter and they'll eat all your food in one shot. They're actually more cautious. And if you think about being a good asymmetric investor of one's time, it does play into how they behave. In retrospect, eating all of the food at once prevents them from having to go back, keeps them full longer, and satisfies their biological drives for sustenance over a greater period of time. So, it does play into this perception that rats are more cautious than their rodent brothers and sisters, the mice family, which happen to be more curious than safety driven. So they'll just want to know what the heck is going on. And in order to fulfill that desire to basically learn, they'll go out, they'll nibble on some food. They won't go full force all in because they don't know if they like it or not. They're, again, very curious, in stark contrast to the rat's behavior of cautious. And these things, once again, just to lay out some facts and figures on the big screen, can really squeeze. Mats. What are we combining the two breeds? Mice, a quarter of an inch. Rats, half of one. Now, to the very prevalent, important, pressing topic of how do you get rid of these things if you discover you have them? Well, first of all, it's to go into anything that you aspire to do or achieve with a good mindset. Remain calm. Now, in pop culture, very often these animals are sources of pure panic, turmoil, anxiety, because they are of a very unsavory, appealing look to them, especially dramatized in recent and classical films, that they scare even the mightiest individuals, or that they are just the crux of animalistic undesirability. First of all, you got to wipe that perception clean here. They are ambitioning to take over your house in some way. Is your house worth the psychological effort it's going to take to get over the fear of rats and mice? I would argue it is. Your apartment, your business, they are all worth your undivided, optimal mindset. So I think it's time to apply it frequently in your life, especially when the snow starts coming and these animals are looking for any source of warmth they can possibly find. Well, one strategy once you've adopted this psychological shift is, ladies and gentlemen, bait and switch them. This is very much related to the old put the cheese on the mousetrap and they'll go in the mousetrap idea. Some interesting notes that you could think about while baiting these animals. Try not to disturb their original habitats. So don't go to the source of these things. Otherwise, they'll realize, hey, you're in my home, everybody scatter, and within a few days or weeks, they found a new place to reside. You don't want to go to the source. You want them to come to you. You want to put an irresistible offer on the table so that by the time they are attracted to whatever it is you have, they're in full-blown hook, line, and sinker, and then you can capture them. So when baiting, try not to disturb their original habitats. Choosing the right size of traps for these rodents is very important, considering just simply the size of a rat versus a mouse. But we'll get to that in a moment. Inspecting for signs of these animals. You want to know if you have them before you start buying the traps to catch them. How would you know? You might hear them in the off hours of your day. You could see scraps of food, again, that are either completely gone or nibbled into, which could imply you have more residents in your house than the humankind. And if that's the case, don't disturb their habitat, right? And then set enough traps. This is a common mistake that individuals trying to catch the rodents in their house make. They don't put out enough feelers to get a vibe on how big their situation is. So in other words, for example, you think on the second floor of your house you have 3 rats. Okay. The specificity of your prediction will aid you. But if you only put 1 trap in one corner of one room and you have 5 rooms just on the second floor of a 3-story house, or 3-level house, I should say, that is not going to suffice. They're going to find ways around it. They'll learn, if only from a first encounter when one of their relatives gets stuck in the trap, or if it's a defective switch, meaning they get the cheese as an example, if that's the classic cartoonist situation. Put the cheese on the trap and then they'll go to it. If they happen to get it and the trap is just a slight bit slow or defective and it misses them, first of all, you just gave them free food. Secondly, they're not going back there because they know the trick already. And third, they're going to be hyper cautious. Again, rats between the two are the more cautious of any and all future free food offerings because they're going to be subconsciously fearful of, hey, is this really free or you're trying to catch me? And this is your schematic. This is your blueprint. This singular slide can help you so much when you're trying to catch these animals. Mice set the traps a few feet apart. Now, why do we say that? They don't venture out as far as rats do. They're not as likely to scale a whole room. They'll stay in a portion of it. Thus, you want the traps only a few feet apart from each other. But rats, on the other hand, just to cover both sides of the spectrum, they're about 15 to 20 feet apart is the optimal length for your trap setting. Because if not, they're a little bit more discoverous. And although they're cautious, they, again, are good investors of their time. They'd rather make one long trip and be done with it for a week or so, or whatever regular interval of time that particular animal prefers, than make small trips every day and risk getting caught just because of the regularity of their movement. So that is your schematic for how do you lay down these traps to prevent mice and rats. And all of this information is going to be readily available in a lengthy, comprehensive transcript that will accompany these slides. And it's been, first of all, a pleasure speaking with you today. If you happen to have mice or rats in your home, feel free to call us at 914-667-5610 for your free consult. We don't want you to have rats and mice in your home. Who does? They eat at everything. They keep you up at night. We don't want that. We want you to live in your home, especially in the winter where we got enough to deal with and it's cold, knowing that when you step in through the doors of your house, it's you and only you. This is your kingdom. This is your sanctuary. Let's keep it that way. Feel free to call us for your free consult. We'll be glad to serve you. It's been an honor speaking with you on this presentation. We hope that you apply it and then take the next step, if you so need it, to seek external help. And if you so choose us, we'd be glad to get rid of the rats and mice in your home. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for listening.